First, we are shown a blood-red sky, trees, and wind around, and we also see how the dead skeletons fly. The main character, Zhong Cheng, begins a story about himself. He was once a pro gamer, but now he has turned into a skeleton, as we see in the frame. A skull with red eyes and one arm missing is crawling towards its bone sword. Some kind of monster with a huge red paw with claws stepped on him. It was a huge furious wolf. 2025, the beta version of the game Great Wastelands. The incredibly realistic open-world game drove 1 million players crazy. The game itself is shown here, where a huge demon is being fought by many players under different characters. Sword and magic were a hobby of the people of that time, and the Great Wastelands provided an opportunity to make a fantasy come true. The demon opened its mouth, where a huge ball of light could be seen. 1,000 tasks and quests allowed the gamer to keep communication and get out of this fantasy world for days. The demon shown earlier released a ball of light that looked like a huge withering ray. Developers were inundated with applications for beta testing. A huge number of beta testers played the game day and night to complete the order. These testers were sitting in one blue room on armchairs, wearing glasses, and around them were the blue screens of their computers. The guy sitting on the chair wearing a mask is the main character who was among the beta testers. The following shows the events about 3 weeks before the premiere. The main character squeezes his heart. He stayed in the game for 42 o'clock, trying to fulfill the plan. Sweat was running down his neck. He was as tense as possible. Watching the beta testers notified that one of them was going to die, so he rather asked the administrator to call in to save his inventory, because if he dies, he will not lose everything that he has in his inventory. It die. Next, we have a girl who screams at the main character to open his eyes, because if he does not help her, she will die. She was more of a bosomy blonde, with beautiful purple eyes. The main character, who was in the form of a skeleton in this game, did not understand what was going on here. He looked at her huge breasts and thought he was in heaven. Suddenly, the ground around them rose up, and it was as if an explosion had occurred. They both looked at the place. There was an undead wolf, elite level, that had bright red fur. The blonde told him that he had to kill him. They both stood and looked at him. This was the undead wolf that could be found in the Great Wasteland primary village, so he realized that this was no paradise at all. This is the place where the player gets to at the beginning, the desert of death. The wolf began to move towards our heroes. Zhong Chen realized that he had been reborn into the world of the Great Wastelands. The girl continued to scream at him to attack, and not to stand, because then both of them would not live. He didn't understand who this girl was, or why she was bossing around. The wolf looked at them with time and immediately made a jump. He attacks. He opened his huge mouth and let out a roar, leaping at the main character. An undead wolf, a second-level predator monster. His weak point is his neck. Zhong Cheng, knowing where to hit, swung his sword. And, as we can see, he struck at the wolf's body, from which blood gushed out of the carcass. But his arm broke and he flew down. He didn't understand why he was so weak. He flew to the ground with a loud sound. I still don't understand everything that is happening. But still, lying on the ground, it dawned on him he embodied an entry-level skeleton. His body was summoned by Nero the novice. Just when he wanted to reach the ball, he was pinned by the paw of the beast. Next, the story is told on behalf of the main character. When he was younger, he won 2 championships. We can see him lifting a huge gold cup in the crowd of spectators. At that time, he thought he was the main character of this world. But a car accident turned his life around. He survived, but since then his hands were constantly shaking, and he could no longer be a sports player. His arms were completely damaged and bandaged. The tendons were stitched, and the bones were secured by a methodical construction. In order to pay medical compensation for the termination of the contract, he had to step over his pride to become a tester. He refused to submit to fate, and he died a shameful death. The employee was told that he was a bastard because he had lost a lot of equipment during testing, and they decided to contact his relatives and drink compensation to her because they thought that he was dead. They heard that he used to be a sports champion and thought that for him such a death was a dream. Yes, you can see how the main character stretches his hand to the light. This color erases the skin of his hand. He never wanted to die so shamefully. The main character in some torn rags was reaching for the light. He will not miss another chance that God has given him. His red eyes glowed purple, and many purple lightning bolts appeared around him, showing all his might. He reached for his ball, and the system revealed a strong desire to survive. The entire space of the prison was covered in purple lightning. The evolutionary system was turned on, which allows for endless character development until he becomes the strongest creature in the game. In connection with his characters, he was given a special gift set. His character was completely hidden by purple lightning bolts. They were studied from his eyes, mouth, and were visible in his chest. His health has fully recovered. The level of his weapons has been raised. His attribute has been increased by 100% with a duration of 30 seconds. The ground around him was shaking. He grabbed his sword and, swinging, killed the wolf with one blow. The blonde looked at it in disbelief. The severed head of a wolf lay on the floor. The main character was standing in the rain, already in his usual form and without purple lightning. The buff was over. For killing an undead wolf, he received 10 experience points and 10 development points. This body is not as weak as he thought. As it turned out, this one was not a skeleton, but was summoned by a blonde who looked at him with delight. The Great Wastelands is a huge open game world with many possibilities. We are shown a gorge of stones against the background of the castle, where we see a purple flame. It's some kind of purple diamond that's in a wooden stick that looked like a staff. The game itself has a lot of possibilities in terms of game mechanics. Next, we see a character similar to a witch in a cloak and hat, who with the help of this purple staff collects stones in one pile that glow with purple magic. A huge stone hand knocks on the ground. Everything is on fire. It's two creatures made of stone fighting, one of them with purple eyes, and the other radiates fire. The witch is watching it all. We are told that there is a possibility that the creature summoned by the player mutates, but this happens extremely rarely. Without involving in one of 1 billion cases, a mutated summoned creature can help the player develop faster. These two beasts, shown earlier, are fighting with each other. They are like cold and flame. The blonde is watching this on the screens. She realized that the skeleton she had summoned had simply mutated. She watched as the skeleton with the sword rose from its feet and a dead wolf lay next to it. A new thing has appeared in the inventory, a wolf's fang, which is used in handicrafts and when creating equipment. A lot of different materials fell out of the wolf, which the players began to collect. A head flew to the blonde's feet, which scared her. The main character quickly killed another wolf. She is confused that she has summoned such a strong character. He mutated and became just incredible. In one move, one by one, he destroyed the wolves, whose bodies were strewn all over the battlefield. His sword pierced the throat of one of them. The skeleton has already adapted to these rattling bones of the body. Wolves are no longer a threat to it. Thanks to this, he quickly gained a new level. He has reincarnated into a newly created virtual world, so the girl who summoned him is a player. The blonde was collecting materials from the wolves while the skeleton was thinking. He has no vocal cords and cannot make any sound. A blue screen appeared around him. He was very surprised by this system of infinitely increasing the level. As long as he kills monsters and people, he will grow. And by killing the boss, he can activate new upgrade points. He looked at the sword and wondered in his head if it was possible to improve the sword with these glasses. While working as a tester, he had never heard of such a system for a specially summoned creature. The development points had reached a value for improvement. This was his first evolution. He used 100 cultivation points to become a skeleton swordsman. He pressed the screen with his bony hand. A fire appeared around him. Evolution began. Everything was on fire. His bones were surrounded by it. It was a protection to appear for the process of evolution. In the process of evolution, health points, mana, and all indicators were increased by 80%. He received the special weapon of the skeleton swordsman, the steel sword of bones. He was all red and blazing with fire. This was the second stage of the development of the skeleton swordsman. He stood looking at his statue, which was well advanced. The first evolution carried a lot of points. He received a special passive skill, fast attacks, which will increase the speed of attacks by 20%. He swung the ball sharply. The length of the ball changed and effects were added. With such stats without using tactics, he will be stronger than players of his level. He stood and stared at his sword, stirred up about how it would cause envy and outrage in other players. Unlike the players and the top and the guild members, he, as a solo player, must have such strength that even 100 could not cope against him. He must be stronger than them. An alert from the system appeared in front of him. She hurries him to score development points as soon as possible. After looking at the corpse of the wolves, he realized that killing them further would not bring him the right amount of points. He had to go to another card. But there is a connection between him and the blonde, because she called him. While the skeleton was thinking about all this, the blonde was collecting resources from the rolls. Since there was a connection between them, he should take her with him. More money from the Great Wastelands can be exchanged for real money and is not cheap at all. The skeleton came up to her and looked. The blonde noticed that he had changed. She began to admire him for being able to change colors, fight monsters, and have a long sword. The skeleton crossed his arms and showed the cross. He needs to learn how to communicate with her without words. She asked if he wanted to go somewhere else. The skeleton pointed with his hands to the side. Now he will communicate with her with gestures. The blonde started crying that she didn't want to leave because there are a lot of monsters that can be killed. A wolf appears here every 30 minutes and elite ones every 2.5 hours. The skeleton decided to stay here for another 1-2 respawns, but is afraid that the players from the guild who help the newcomers here will come here. The blonde continued to cry. But if this girl is beaten by others, then he will simply disappear. The skeleton threw her over his shoulder to a loud outcry and carried another world. He no longer has a predilection for the old world. He will do everything in this game to develop, and he will be in charge. Next, we see a knight in armor who was running away from some kind of danger. Next, a creature with red eyes is shown, which leaves huge bear tracks on the ground. We see a bear-like creature that holds an already dead knight in its mouth. It was the next card. Our heroes have moved to the next map called the Mountain of Bloodthirsty Bears. It was a forest with high mountains. As a friend, someone lets out a heart-rending scream. People are surrounded by monsters. We see them trying to escape from them. These were the huge bears that lived on this map. The knight was sitting on the ground and thought he was going to die. It seemed to him that the guys from the team had come to save him. The main character stood behind him with a blonde. The knight screamed at what he saw. Since he had a blood loss debuff on him, he died in front of our main characters. The bloodthirsty artist bear screamed again and threw a piece of wood at the heroes. The blonde began to panic that it was dangerous here and that they could not lose everything. I was happy with the summer because the last players have already been decided here and no one will bother him. All the bears were in one pile, which was just to his advantage to level up. He threw the blonde to the ground. They were surrounded by bears on all sides. Their fierce red eyes stared at all the bushes. The bear noticed them and the skeleton, picking up a sword, ran at him. He was noticed by more and more bears, but he kept running to get everyone on himself, because that way they would be distracted from the girl. The bear hit the ground with its paw right next to Zhongchen. He opened his mouth and would like to eat it. But the skeleton dodged. With such a level of health, it will not withstand even 2 blows. The bears continued to scream and beat their paws on the ground, trying to catch the skeleton. He skillfully avoided their attacks. The blonde was surprised because he was so fast that they couldn't even touch him. The skeleton jumped on the head of one of the bears to provoke them to fight among themselves. He moves faster than other players of the same level due to the modification of the game engine. These bears have thick skins and high attack damage, but he dominates them with his speed. The weak points of the bear on the head and ankles. The skeleton swung the ball and activated the skill of the fastball technique. He hit the bear's paw, and it immediately fell. The skeleton hit the tendon. All the bears were lying on the floor and limping, and he weakened his ankles with a blow. I looked at them and thought how I would kill them. But ferocious bears are nicknamed rookie fighters. The bear screamed again and blue lightning appeared around them. Having been wounded in a limb, they can use their main skill. We see how they use it, and there are huge blue lightning bolts on their head. An electric shock can paralyze the player. The skeleton became a drain and prepared for a lightning strike. He raised his sword and a huge lightning bolt fell on him. The blonde began to worry that her skeleton would not be able to reflect this. But Zhongchen stood confidently in the same stance. He had a trait of the divine race, initial immunity to paralysis. Because he is undead, he has no blood or muscles. It is impossible to paralyze him. He jumped out at the bear and plunged the sword into its head at the moment of reloading the lightning strike, which lasts 3 seconds. The bear fell from this blow because he was hit in a weak spot. With such abilities, the skeleton will be able to kill everyone without taking damage. He started killing the bears one by one, gaining development and experience points. He watered another bear and got a new level. The blonde was just delighted that her age is such a hero, and that he moves like the legendary gamer Zhongchen. She thought it was an Easter egg from the developers in honor of Zhongchen. I liked this skeleton more and more. The blonde looked at the pressure of the battle. There were corpses of bears everywhere, where there was a lot of gold and materials, but she couldn't get them mixed up. The creak of arrows aside, there was still a pack of bears. He was very close to the next evolution. A screen appeared in front of him, and a path of development was open for him. Thanks to his hard work, a hidden path of development has been opened. He had 3 choices in front of him with different paths of development, which he needed to collect points for. He saw a purple ball that looked like a clot of matter. It was signed as 3 question marks and was worth 2,000 development points. He decided to continue clearing this area so that a hidden boss would appear. Based on everything, he chose a hidden path for 2,000 development points. He can't wait to find out what this hidden path is. The hero continued to fight on Bear Mountain. He tore apart the bears with his sword, gaining development points. After killing the last bear, he revealed his stats. By increasing the level, development points are obtained in even greater numbers. But the bears ran out when he did not collect 20 development points, and the respawn of clawed bears more than an hour later. He started collecting loot from all the bears, getting a copper and a bear crystal. A sign appeared in front of them. A hidden boss appeared nearby. It remained to deal with him. He saw a purple portal appear in front of him in the forest, from which light emanated. The hidden boss appears on the mountain only under very clear conditions, only for players up to level 10 who have killed all the bears in no more than 45 minutes. From that place before the strong wind, the boss appeared in front of him, the king of the Bear Mountains. A huge beast with pink claws peered out from behind the tree, from which a terrifying aura emanated. He was glowing purple all over and was just huge. The skeleton was standing behind a tree and watching him. He was thinking how to kill him, because just attacking won't work, and driving at high speed is too dangerous. He couldn't remember how to kill this boss, so he decided to just be careful and not touch the boss until he reached a higher level. He decided to wait for respawn. The skeleton was overcome by strange feelings. It glowed with a violet light that seemed to come from the source in a wave. What was the connection between him and this girl like? Since he had been reborn here, he had felt this connection. He decided to find her just in case. I went to the place where the girl was. The blonde was looping bears. I watched it all from the bushes and noticed other players. The players were looking for monsters, but there were none because everyone had already been killed. They were wondering who the brazen one was who had taken over their tiger guild hunting ground. They assumed that these were people from the Fist sect. One of the gels ordered to find him, because the corpses have not disappeared yet, so he is somewhere nearby. If they find it and bring it to the guild leader, he will reward them. The group split up in different directions. One knight found a blonde that delighted the bears. He asked her where she came from and what she was doing on their territory. She admitted that she was just looking for her recognized being. The knights were surprised, because usually a summoned creature does not run away from a necromancer. They didn't believe her, so they asked where her team was. The man ordered to tie him up and not leave the game and interrogate where her teammates were. Vadam Yala did not like this idea, and she stood up for the fight. One of the guides of the Civ applied an investigation and informed everyone that she was not lying, because she was a necromancer of the 9th level. Necromancers summon creatures. They have low attack power and movement speed. She would not even kill one bear, but she cut bears, exactly made by a sword master, and most importantly, that this player is not a member of the team. He concluded that someone else had killed the bears, and she had wandered in here because she was a scavenger. Scavenger is a low-level player following large teams of monster hunters. They split up further to find the one who killed the bear. The man in the black raincoat reached out to the blonde, clearly not with good intentions. But he was unlucky. As you can see, there is a skeleton behind him, a purple aura around him. The blonde was horrified and mentally named the skeleton. Zhang Cheng put his hand on the guy's shoulder and immediately shouted. All the players paid attention to this and were surprised, because this is a skeleton warrior. He hugged the blonde who was crying from the whole situation. The man in the purple raincoat was crying and shouting that something was wrong with his hand. But the skeleton, don't pay attention to them, threw the blonde over his shoulder and walked out of here. The inmates ran after them to catch them. It was the Tiger Hunters Guild, a new, large guild under the control of the Xinyuan group, known for its brutality. Over time, the premiers did not capture the hunting corners of Bear Mountain and the Valley of Streams. They collect tribute from the players for hunting in their lands. Apparently, they have information about many hidden dungeons on these two maps and are looking for new ones. A skeleton with a blonde is rushing through the whole forest from the guild. The man was running at their heels. The blonde held on tightly to the skeleton and was afraid that they would be caught. But the skeleton did not listen to her and ran on, holding her tightly on his shoulder. He threw me into the bushes, which the blonde didn't like very much. Then further without her, he wanted to distract the players from the blonde. I stopped in a clearing and waited until everyone came here. Fortunately, his sudden attack wrapped them around the disciple to make it easier for him to fight. He took a stance and swiped the ball away. How did the purple wind form around him? The guildsmen did not understand where the girl had gone, and did not think that she was controlling the skeleton. We also did not understand how such a woman could single-handedly exterminate so many bears, and most importantly, why. The skeleton stood a little apart from them and watched. One of the guilds sent a man in a green cloak to investigate, but he was too angry that some skeleton dared to attack him. He took the kunai out from under his cloak. He screamed that he would kill him. The partners tried to calm down, but it was all in vain. The skeleton, flashing red eyes, swung the ball. While at this moment, the owl, a man in a green raincoat, threw a lot of kunai. The skeleton skillfully beat off all kunai with a sword. The guild decided that it was possible to attack because there was no ambush. They ordered him to be beaten and did not move to his side. The success man made a jump and swung his sledgehammer at the skeleton. He hit the ground hard because thanks to dexterity, the skeleton dodged. They were surprised that a low-level skeleton was so nimble and fast, when suddenly a purple spot appeared, which resembled the appearance of the main boss. And so it happened. The hidden boss, the king of the Bear Mountains, noticed the guildsmen. An alert about this appeared in front of all the guild members. They were very surprised. The boss's red fierce eyes were looking at them now. A moment later, this huge bear appeared in front of them. He jumped out of the bushes at them and looked very angry. The chief ordered everyone to stand in a loose formation, because this jump meant an attack with a range of action. The boss landed on the ground, and everything was annoying and smoke and dust appeared. The owl did not have time to escape and died. The Bear Mountain was huge, much bigger than ordinary bears. He stood in front of the knight and was ready to attack. The bear let out a heart-rending howl. He activated the Bear Rage skill. The guildsmen decided to run away because they couldn't handle him. As a friend, their bodies lit up with blue light and did not begin to levitate. The king of Bear Mountains has activated the Tornado Force Field skill, with which he can control gravity. Men have lost the ability to move. The skeleton has been watching them all this time and remembering all the skills and how to resist them. Since this is a small-level boss, his skills cannot last long, and he decided to observe how much they will last. The bear took one of the knights in its mouth. They figured out that they were lured to the hidden boss on purpose. As soon as the presentation returned, the men ran in a moment, because they suffered too much loss and they have little health. They noticed that the skeleton was missing from the bushes. He jumped out from somewhere and with a light movement of the ball killed all the guildsmen who had so little HP. The boss had felled the trees and was moving towards the skeleton. Because you killed the players for 6 years, you gave him 20 development points, which was enough for him to start the evolution process. The bear opened its mouth and screamed again. The skeleton began the process of evolution. When the skeleton activated the process of evolution, a huge lightning immediately struck it, and a field formed around it. It will be protected from damage for 3 seconds so as not to interrupt the evolution process. His bones were covered in armor and torn rags. He grabbed the bear's fang. He received an alert that he had evolved a skeleton knight of the 3rd level and received a power attack bone darts. He started carrying a lot of punches to the bear's paws. His fastball technique has been improved. His speed has been increased by 40%. He's the boss because he has the same weaknesses as other bears. They looked at each other and immediately engaged in battle. The bear stepped next to the skeleton, but it managed to return even wandering evolution. He activated the wall of protection that it was possible to take damage from a distance before that. He raised his hand and sharp bones began to fly out of his hands, which pierced into the paws and face of the beast. The bear's bark has activated the tornado's force field and the skeleton is lifted up, making it difficult to move, and when the tornado subsides, the boss will attack. The skeleton continued to release sharp bones because the storm field is wide, so the beast will definitely get hit with darts. All the eyes of the beast were covered in bones. The skeleton walked around the beast. It needed to hit the eye to distract. He took advantage of weightlessness to strengthen his punch. He slipped under the bear and drove the ball right through the belly. The beast fell and began to bleed. The king of Bear Mountain increased gravity and began throwing rocks and trees at the skeleton. His eyes were completely damaged, so he couldn't see anything. The skeleton climbed onto one of the raised stones. He pushed off from this stone and threw the remaining damaged eye into darts, jumped with the ball at the beast. The weightlessness stopped and the skeleton fell. while at the moment the bear was covering his eyes with his hands because they were completely damaged. But unfortunately, the skill of Kostya darts spends his bones, so he can no longer use them. Suddenly, the space around thickened, became hazy, dark blue, and with lightning. A voice from nowhere said that he had been waiting for this player very much. That's what the bearish boss said. There was a huge bright ray near the boss. The stone that was on his side began to glow blue and sparkle with lightning. The beast said that this was his last gift as the boss of Bear Mountain. The bear screamed. His stone began to explode with lightning. He uses the skill of 1000 lightning. A lot of lightning erupted from his body. From the words of the skeleton, it was a new skill that did not exist before. Fortunately, the skeleton was immune to electricity and began to get closer to the beast. The blonde started running to him because he didn't come back. She wanted to save him. The blonde saw a black ball in the sky. And, as we can see, this is a bear without eyes, which is beaten by a skeleton. A notification appeared that the skeleton had killed its first hidden boss, Bear Mountains, which gave it a new level. Huge skyscrapers are shown here. This is the apartment of the tiger hunters. There was a man in the room who was watching the battle of the guild with bears on a tablet. He was swearing because they lost the field in the bears area, so also a newcomer with My Beat's hidden boss. He lost a lot of money because of them. The men who were the players were lying on the floor and trying to reach the gentleman. They promised that they would find this man, that he would not leave the city alive. Well, the boss didn't listen to them. He picked up a golf club and brought it to the ball that was sticking out of the teeth of one of the men. He looked at them from high up. As a friend, he swung his stick and hit. He wiped his hands of blood and was indignant that these three were killed by just one. In part, all is not lost. The implementation of the plan for the valley area is progressing well. The bear zone is not so important to them now. The gentleman asked to send people to capture this player and continue to send reinforcements to the area of this valley. Now the events in Bear Mountain are shown again. You called in more skeletons that started collecting loot from the boss to sell it all later. Jiang Cheng sat on the troop and posted about his. The bear's entire face was covered in sharp bones. The blonde wore a new outfit of a ferocious beast that sat perfectly on her body. There was also a tail and boots. The hood had ears. It looked adorable. She collected a lot of gold and material from it. She suggested that the skeleton return to the city to sell the material and get money. The look of the mind went to get rid of it. He opened his stats and began to study. There was a very big leap. His value far exceeds the 15th level. Moreover, the new skills are quite simple to use. He also received new durable bone armor. A room appeared in front of him. The collection system congratulates him on the discovery of a hidden route. Now he needs to collect 20,000 evolution points. This is a lot, because for killing a monster, he gets only 10-20 points. The skeleton thought about the blonde. Since he is connected with her, then he must make her stronger, because the first skill of a necromancer after evolution is considered to strengthen the skeleton. The blonde waved and shouted. She found a treasure chest. An ordinary chest. It was a chest with a rather ferocious beast. It was a reward for killing it. They opened the chest, and there were rare skill books, the cover of which was made as if from wool with a stone in the middle. The blonde gave these books to him because she is grateful for the amount of money that she managed to take. There was a skill that could be used to stoke several monsters at the same time. The skeleton began to study. He opened the book and lightning immediately started coming out of it. In front of him is a sign asking whether to use the skill book plus cheat. The skeleton pressed yes and the countdown started. He has learned the heavy thunder alignment skill, thanks to which he releases several consecutive lightning bolts, each of which deals 200 units of magical damage to objects in the area of action. He started testing, and his sword flashed with lightning. He swung, and a huge explosion of lightning swept across the ground. This ranged combat, the attack level is too low, but he will be able to use the experience of evolution to develop this skill. He used all the experience of evolution to improve this skill. Suddenly, a huge column of light appeared in his place. The skeleton's entire sword shone with magic. The skeleton's aura had changed. He pumped a heavy smoke blast to the 5th level and decided to test. After using the skill and hitting the ball on the ground, a huge wave of lightning passed and everything shook. A burning trail was left after the impact. Thanks to this, he will get evolution points much faster. He took the blonde in his arms and carried her somewhere again. Since the launch of the game, the artificial intelligence controlling the game has begun to evolve. Without numerical quads, storylines were also constantly evolving, quickly building a complex system of the game world. We see an electric spiral, which is most likely a portal, the final point of all quests. The final point of all quests is the dungeon, which stores a huge number of items and coins. At the same time, the dungeons of each region, if certain conditions are met, can trigger a hidden storyline. In them, wealth multiplies exponentially. Therefore, as soon as the game server was launched, large guilds quickly occupied several such monster habitats and continued to study the conditions for opening hidden dungeons there. The map shows places such as the main ridge, the valley, Bear Mountain, and the Deadly Desert. The Bear Mountain and Valley areas belong to the Tiger Hunting Guild. This is their sphere of influence. The entrance to the valley looks like a rocky area. There are small creatures that are completely in the rocks. The knights made their way along the road, pushing aside these little creatures. There were several of them, and they examined this area. They had occupied the mountains' territories for a long time, but they could not figure out the conditions after the appearance of the hidden boss. The knight of the red armor, which is probably the main thing, says that they moved to the valley since the hidden boss is not updated, so the mountains things no longer have value. But with the valley, everything is different. The hidden dungeon is not yet protected there, so the knights were given tasks to continue their journey for reinforcements. They are thinking of setting up an ambush on the road to catch a skeleton with a blonde. They sat down and the boss began to talk about the chance that the couple would come here. They talked blonde. It is rumored that this is a 200-kilogram possessed necromancer. Although the level is not high, she likes to play with other players of the country of the game, which already sounds quite intimidating. The roar of the armor said that most of all in life to hate perverts, but they came prepared. He had a blunt weapon, the level of which depends on the destruction of armor. He talked about the necromancer, that they were just magicians, and all the skeletons, called up at an early stage, were just cannon fodder, causing physical damage. Today they just changed into a heavy suite with full physical stability. A man in armor with crosses raised Alda at the top, which glowed golden. This divine attribute completely neutralizes the called. Suddenly, a huge purple lightning bolt crashed down next to them. They escaped 1 point and were completely surrounded by thunder and lightning. They thought they had found a hidden boss, but these are the attacks of a magic player. This magic damage was very strong. It screamed with every hit. The knights began to stand in a different way to defend themselves with a shield, but even with a full set they had no resistance. The captain was about to tell them to leave. Suddenly lightning struck them, and not all died. It was a skeleton, of course. The blonde called for new ones to clean up all the corpses. She sat on his shoulder and drank mana while the skeleton watched on the battlefield. He looked at their corpses, and Russ wondered how these people were killed by his AO damage and why they were hiding here. He saw a mark on the breastplates. This is the badge of the Tiger Hunters Guild. And he realized that these were paladins. They had heavy armor with high physical resistance. The skeleton realized that they needed him. He had previously heard that the territory of the Tiger Hunters was quite large, but he did not expect that they also owned the territory of the valley. The blonde noticed that the knight in red armor was still alive. He was paralyzed. He wanted to survive the reinforcements, when suddenly a skeleton sword fell on him and pinned him to the ground. The skeleton took off his equipment. A red-haired girl turned out to be under the armor. The blonde came up to her to ask more about their plans for this valley, but the red-haired one said that he would not tell her anything, and it would be better to kill her. She screamed that she hated perverts and considered the blonde a pervert, because everyone thought she was controlling a skeleton. The skeleton approached her with a bag of silver coins. Seeing this, the red hair said that he would still answer a couple of questions, because there were 50 coins in the bag, and one silver coin was 25,000 rubles. They decided to force her to reveal everything about the Tiger Hunters Guild. They paid the girl the money and said they would give her a couple of questions. The red-haired woman approached the blonde and put her hand on her shoulder, but the rock immediately removed those hands. Vicky needed to protect her. She said that she and her brothers were just errand boys who needed money. They had lost a lot, but the skeleton with the blonde offered more. She promised that she would not tell anything about this meeting. Gracie said she really wanted to hug, so at the same moment she wrapped the blonde in her arms. He began to tell them that their ambush was spontaneous, not on the orders of the guild, but the players who actually received the order to track down the blonde. Probably the ball was still on Bear Mountain. But judging by how fast they are walking, no one will be able to catch up with them. The skeleton had been standing watching since that time. The beauties continued to tell that the territory of the valley is not as simple as it seems. These lands have always been the center of the guild's defense, and recently they have involved more labor there. She was told there were problems in the main part of the valley. Now even those who are responsible for small jobs on the periphery are involved there. Also, Red Hair heard that almost everyone who is better than level 15 has been transferred to the valley to provide assistance. It is now almost completely controlled. No one can pass through the site and go unnoticed. Moreover, Biceps Zidon Viper, the most powerful fighter of the Union, should already be the centerpiece. We see this is a knight who looks like an assassin, with a purple color on his face. He is a killer of the second rank with the 30th level. No matter how strong the blonde is, she will not be able to defeat him. Because of this sniper, it's hard to get to the city to be unnoticed, so they now need to think about how to secure the crossing of these lands. The skeleton began to reflect on this difficult situation. He remembered that Red Hair had said something about a problem in copying. Most likely it was related to the NPCs in the area that were issuing quests. Unlike Bear Mountain, the valley has a full-fledged game system. So, if the player wants to activate some hidden process, it remains only to wait for the epic to give the task. Algorithmically, the mechanism of the Great Wasteland will evolve over time. There are also various epics that Easter eggs can give, and the randomness of such tasks is also quite high. If you do not understand what the goal is, there will be much more losses than acquisitions, so the risk is too great, but you cannot ignore this opportunity. The Tiger Hunters really mobilized a bunch of players to defend. It became even more difficult. The skeleton needs to figure it out better before making a plan. The skeleton began to examine the armor of the guildsmen and their characteristics. As a friend of Red Hair, the girl offered to show a safe point to the center of the valley. The blonde suggested that the skeleton put on the armor of the knights, then no one would recognize them. Gracie wants to earn more money but doesn't want to be expelled from the guild, so she refused. If ordinary players like them don't have guilds to put on, then the game is over. The blonde tried to persuade her for money to take them to the center of the valley, but it was in vain. As a friend, 1 gold coin appeared in the hands of the skeleton, so the Red Hair did not hesitate to take this coin and agreed that she would take it instead of the mission. That crossing the valley is very dangerous, so they should obey her and not act rashly. After all, there are not only elite monster players ahead. Caution will not hurt. The skeleton pretends to be a companion for Red Hair so as not to arouse suspicion. She also asked the blonde not to summon skeleton warriors and to hide game information. The skeleton put on the armor of one of the knights. The beauty once again notified that there is a lot of danger ahead and you need to be careful, but the blonde had a completely fearless expression on her face because the red hair just hadn't seen the strength of his skeleton yet. They moved out on the road. The skeleton cleaned up all the monsters along the way. Red Hair was surprised that his skills could hold back all the mobs here. Since the blonde can't summon other skeletons, she said that everything will collect Red Hair. Krasnogorskaya said that a level 15 mob lives nearby, which looks like a pile of stones connected by a blue flame. They have to kill him. The skeleton killed monsters, and the blonde commanded the Red Hair to collect all the items. With each one, we constantly dropped evolution points. They killed some kind of huge snake, which was also easy for them. Next, they killed a huge spider. The girl with red hair was very surprised that the level 10 players had such power, and where did the skeleton get such skills and precise control? The skeleton easily maneuvered between the spider's paws and dodged the blows, easily killing it. They heard someone screaming and asking for help. It was a player. They saw that a huge man was running after the little boy. The boy was from the Tiger Hunters Guild. The blonde was surprised that the guild had such young members. She thought that someone had just hacked someone else's account. Crazy said that when a person creates his character then he becomes, in fact, his real reflection. The boy kept running away from this man, shouting that this man was crazy and needed help. The man was very angry. His eyes were red with anger. He clenched his hand into a fist and said he would kill everyone. Most likely, this is what happened, and an explosion occurred, because of which all the characters rushed to the side and their ears rang. The blonde fainted from this. Red Stripes, I wonder if the skeleton will be able to live if its owner is out. This man is a hand-to-hand combatant of the first class. From the blows with which the man landed, he began to bleed and blurred his consciousness. He was trembling all over, and he did not have much blood left. The boy shouted to the skeleton that the man was almost dead. He needed to be finished off, because if the melee starts using status skills, it will be difficult to cope with him. I looked at the guy. He looked like he was just a poacher who had not changed his profession, especially since hand-to-hand combat equipment is not cheap. It was also unclear why the man did not run away if he was seriously injured. Instead, he continued to fight for his life. The hand-to-hand combatant stood up and said that he had nothing to talk about with such beasts as you. These are not bandits and are accustomed to sneaky methods, so he decided to fight them. He used the blood dance skill and turned red all over. Stones rose around him. He activated his main ability. He swung his fist and shouted at the red hair to jump aside. The melee swung his arm and collided with a girl in red armor. A strong light formed between them, crushing everything around. The skeleton came up behind the man and, swinging his ball, struck the man. He killed him. An alert appeared in front of him to receive evolution points. He was a little over 5,000 short. The boy who ran away from him began to collect all his things. At first, Red Hair asked what kind of group he was, but he said that they did not know him. The boy ran somewhere again and told them to move faster after him. They followed the boy through the woods together. The boy turned out to be from the Ghost Bat Squad. Crazy asked why they are all extremely busy. They go to the center like everyone else. And the boys replied that they had been here for several days. They heard someone's voice and looked at the source of the sound. An almost dead man was hung from a tree to get trapped. They did not look around. The boy led them to the place where the ears, which he had designed himself. There were many corpses on all the traps that could not leave the game and just suffered. Some rowing trees, some were impaled with a stake. This is a guild that hunts for players. The boy told them to leave all the supplies and take the equipment at their discretion, and asked them not to kill these players, not to let them go free. I realized that the guild is using children as bait to weaken the vigilance of the players. A group of knights came from behind them and asked Red Hair why she was finding Lem, because she didn't like anyone to see her. Apparently, they were her acquaintances. As it seemed, it was a member of the Leopard Ghost Bat Squad. Creek covered his sword with lightning bolts and brought the tip to the neck of one of the men. The boy returned to them and said that another river, it seemed that the man who came was his boss, who immediately slapped him hard in the face. The man said that they were just following orders from the boss, but the Red Hair was not satisfied with such an answer. Therefore, the man will continue to say that all the groups coming from Dalen must now obey his superiors, and they are no exception. This is due to the BCC. If they don't want to be kicked out of the valley, then she needs to take her team members and follow him to the central part. We see some man who was fighting a knight with dark magic. He fought with the skeleton, but did not understand what kind of creature it was. Because the skeleton withstood several shadow balls, nothing happened. The skeleton was a one-time item and immune to some magical damage. The man began to beg for mercy. He was tired of listening, so he was pierced by a sword with lightning, thereby killing. He saw that 2 rings had not fallen off him. These rings had their own characteristics that buffaloed the player. He decided that he would give the rescue ring to the red-haired woman. One of the rings was called 2 breathing goats. As it turned out, it was a necromantic NPC boss who accepted the task. The skeleton abruptly stood up and went into the dungeon to complete the quest. He accidentally bumped into a man with a beer and glared at him. He decided to test what the players in this guild are capable of. A strong wind picked up in a building that looked like a cafe. All the food and drinks were falling off the tables, and people didn't understand what was going on. As it seemed, the skeleton just killed the goat. I was outraged at what the skeleton was doing, because you can't just kill people like that. I was thinking that there are mostly players around the 14th level, and all with basic professions, no magicians and paladins. These newcomers do not pose a threat to him. The man got up from the table to talk to him. He shouted at him that he was giving him a choice. Either he leaves everything with him and logs out, or nothing. Because before he could finish, the skeleton swung his ball and plunged it into the man. Everyone around raised a panic. A big massacre started here. Everyone started attacking the skeletons, but the latter clumsily fought back and dodged all attacks. His body was blocking the blows, and they couldn't hit him. People shouted that they should stay away from him, because he was a magical swordsman and would not do anything to them. Suddenly, the skeleton activated the bone armor shooting mode and, seeing the archer, shot him with sharp bones. Bone arrows flew at all the players. They did not understand what it was and where you removed it from. A man found it, completely armored in iron and with a huge shield. He told them to limit the movement of the skeleton. The skeleton threw the table over, thereby separating itself from the knight. The knight broke the table out, took advantage of the moment, got up from below and swung the ball with great speed and killed the player. The skeleton killed more than a dozen alone. The players were wondering who he was. An elite squad led by the vice president to destroy the skeleton. The average ones were balls and assassin, which are not equipped with auxiliary professions. There are advantages in terms of skeleton attributes, but this elite squad has a good level. The squad attacked the skeleton and he began to fight back. They had average abilities. The level was too high. The skeleton thought that if he spent more time, he would miss the mission with the goat. A spirit can be summoned by wandering around and magnifying its gaze menacingly. This is a boss whose level is many times higher than the levels of other mobs in this area. His appearance will cause the monsters that have been updated next to the dungeon to also grow. The Keel of Tiger Hunters does not expect mobs to suddenly become stronger. The skeleton used a lightning strike. I didn't understand what kind of profession it was. For a skeleton, killing monsters is the least effective method, and constantly fighting consumes too many supplies. He continued to fend off the blows. There is a god not of the 99th level Archmage skeleton Veronica that gives out a mission. If you can suddenly complete it, you will receive nothing more than just clothes. They are also afraid of the Necromancer's transformation script scroll. The group couldn't handle the skeleton, so one of them drank a strengthening potion, which increases the strength of attributes by 20%. Judging by the current size of the camp, the goat spirit has been in the valley for at least a week. Even if tiger hunters rely on killing mobs to increase the menacing gaze, the fictitiousness is extremely low. The view decided that there was no time to waste, and it was time to go to the center. The man stopped them from throwing the skeleton all ranged attacks. Skeletons have become more difficult to fight, because the knights have drunk strengthening potions, so you can't waste too much time. They started throwing burning bombs at him. There was smoke everywhere. Suddenly, a sign appeared in front of him. He had developed a thunder skill and unlocked a branch of the thunder defense skill. All the opponents were surprised because he was made of bones and covered in lightning. The blonde woke up from loss of consciousness. The beauty scolded her for what she was doing. As a friend, the blonde went offline. Again, she did not understand how she managed to log out of the network and what happened to her conscript. She began to wonder if she could have a mind of her own here. It was purple in color. She went to see what happened there. The skeleton killed all the players. I thought that the blonde passed out right after everyone was killed, but that's impossible. The skeleton was standing, a sword at one of the players. Red Hair thought it was worth staying away from him. The skeleton raised the sword of one of the assassins. It was a dagger of rapid shadow, which gives the effect of bleeding. When he was pumping, he had an order for a similar dagger. It looks like it was an order from this assassin. A huge lightning bolt appeared in the middle of the room again. The skeleton finished off everyone. He decided that he needed to go to the central area urgently. He didn't know what to do because the blonde was offline, and while she was reconnecting, she could be killed. He thought it would be nice if someone guarded her while he was immersed in the fight. He threw off his red hair, which was afraid of the look, and ran away. She thought he wanted to kill her. The skeleton touched her shoulder, and she began to remember the places where the skeleton killed. She remembered that he protected her all the way, so she assumes that he really has a mind. He grabbed me by the collar and dragged me somewhere. We see a fire. All the people are running away. They idolize a blonde to be lifted up by a woman in red armor. They said that she sent ordinary players and defeated all the tiger hunters, thereby saving. They thanked her and shouted what a monster tiger hunters are. The skeleton was watching from behind, watching it all. Red Hair started telling people that the tiger hunters' goal is not to take all the money. Their goal is a Hidden Valley mission. That's why they need to stop them all and kill them. To tell them that they were dropped off because they knew about their plans. Most of the hunters' forces are in the central zone, and the protection of the outer borders of the valley has weakened. This is their chance to break through and return to the main city. She paid attention to and the place where there were many different pieces, jabber traps and treasures. All people were interested in it in a moment, otherwise they began to consider what was there. The skeleton looked at everything that was happening. Everything was going according to his plan. A player who was wearing a cloak and iron armor approached them. He suspected something. Krasnova said that in a few minutes the headquarters of the tiger hunters will receive a message about the capture of the camp. There will be too many of them, so the players need to take some art and kill them all. Red Hair walked up to the skeleton and said that she had done everything he asked. His goal was to allow ordinary players to intervene in the war with tiger hunters. Kolosov is still surprised by the fact that while the summoner is offline, the summoned object can continue to follow the player's instructions. They took the blonde in a bag and went into the woods. The skeleton stopped abruptly, and a woman in red armor crashed into it. He covered her with his body, shooting that he was flying. He would not understand where. They were attacked by enemies. The strange armored player appeared in front of them. It was a shadow assassin. His level is high. His skills are better than anyone else's. They were standing in front of each other. It was Saved who saw through their plan, but Red Hair didn't show it, and said they just wanted to escape from the valley. The assassin said he would go with them. He is not interested in the task. He has only one goal: he is going to kill the Viper.